Welcome back to Bombadil Tree Farm, an American tree farm system certified family forest since 1978, and the proud recipient of Maine's Outstanding Tree Farmer of the Year Award for 2022. You may remember certified wildlife biologist Joe Wiley from an earlier video in which he provided advice on reforestation of our clear-cuts from the standpoint of benefiting wildlife. In this video, Joe joins me for walks through Bombadil Tree Farm to share with me and with you a small fragment of his lifetime of knowledge and experience of the animals that share their forest home with us. I had many things I wanted to show Joe, and we started in a patch of woods along the edge of an old gravel pit that abounded in signs left by wildlife. A variety of animals have obviously enjoyed the top edge of this gravel pit. Who made this burrow over here? It doesn't look like it's still being used, but who made it, Joe?
It looks like an inactive woodchuck hole, and usually they have several entrances that look just like this to the same system of burrows.
Now, Joe, in this area also on the edge of that old gravel pit, the ground is blanketed with rabbit droppings. And they're obviously not fresh, but the ground really is, the forest floor is blanketed with rabbit droppings. Could you comment?
Yeah, Vince, I actually think that these are deer pellets and not rabbit pellets, and I base that basically that this is decent shelter. It's not really snowshoe hare habitat, and the density of the number of pellets in a group, rabbits tend to have scattered pellet groups where deer have concentrated pellet groups like this one right here. So I'm gonna say that these are deer pellets.
And here at the edge of the spruce plantation, its edge where it drops down into this old gravel pit, there's some animal droppings right here. What are those?
It looks like either red fox or raccoon scat. There's a bunch of berry seeds. I can see berry seeds in it, which leads me to believe it's a raccoon, although fox will eat berries as well.
Hey, what about this ant mound? Does it have any benefit for any other forms of wildlife?
Yes, northern flickers are big ant eaters, and it looks to me like they've been probing in this hill, which I can't really tell if it's active or not, and to get ants. And this is right on the berm of an old gravel pit, so they brought a lot of soil to the surface, and even the red squirrels are taking advantage to peel the spruce cones here. So.
Having heard many criticisms, I wanted Joe's opinion of my 2-acre spruce plantation from the standpoint of wildlife.
So plantations get a bad rap because of the common misconception that they're wildlife deserts. That's not true. They aren't as good a habitats as some other mixed habitats, but they do provide habitats for specific species, red squirrels being a prime example in this softwood plantation that has cones, the primary food of red squirrels. They also have open understories, which are very attractive to some species of songbirds for nesting and for foraging.
And Joe, within this Norway spruce plantation, Norway spruce, the scientific name is Picea abies, there are many piles around the base of many trees of cones. Can you explain what these are about?
Yes, this is a red squirrel cone midden, which the squirrels cut the cones in the tops of the trees at this time of year, mature cones, and they stockpile them at the base of the tree, and then because that provides easy access to them throughout the winter, when the midden is covered with snow, they basically have a small snow cave with their food supply in the wintertime, which takes them down out of the weather and out of the reach of predators to feed on the cones throughout the winter.
Here Joe is pointing out a cache of new cones freshly harvested, and beside it an older midden from a previous winter. Joe is picking up 3 cones. The one on the left is the remnant core of a cone after a squirrel has stripped off its scales to get at the seeds hidden underneath. The one in the middle is an old cone, only partially dined upon, and the one on the right a fresh cone. And here we see a single cone scale with its pair of seeds as they naturally lie. And here we see them removed with their silhouettes still visible on the cone scale. I shot this video footage in mid-September while squirrels were cutting cones in the treetops and cones were falling all around us. Here is one that didn't quite make it to the ground. The little rascals work hard, and I was not only very lucky to catch this one taking a lunch break, but to also have it demonstrate how it strips off the cone scales to get at the seeds underneath. As Joe and I continued our walk, we came across another ant colony, this one quite active. The birds and bears that feed on ants haven't yet discovered it. Many years ago, these scars were fresh wounds on this tree, and they were obviously bear claw marks. You can see right here, this claw mark, this claw mark, this claw mark, this claw mark, and this claw mark. Bear paws are very much like human hands. What I couldn't figure out, however, is why a bear would be climbing a white pine, and why, if it did want to climb a white pine, it stopped right here. You can see the claw marks here and no higher up the tree. So it decided, maybe for fun, to just climb that high, but and then jump down. It looks like it didn't climb up and then climb down. It looks like it just climbed up and jumped down. You got any better idea, Joe?
Okay, Vince, I think the answer to the riddle is that this is a suppressed, overtopped, I should say, apple tree, and it probably had a lot of fruit in the year in which the bear climbed up the tree, and these are kind of small for the bear to try and climb up. That's much more their speed, and they grab the branch, and like they do in beech trees, and they grabbed the branch and pulled it down to get the apples.
Joe, here's another 1 acre, which is about 4/10 of a hectare, Norway spruce. And again, Norway spruce is Picea abies, a Norway spruce plantation. And last winter, almost every morning when I came with my tractor along the edge of this to get back to the harvest area I was working, there were deer, 5 or 6 deer, bedded down in here. And I was kind of curious as to what it was that attracted them. It's only 1 acre on the south edge where you see the bright sunlight over there. What there are is there's some bushes, there's openings, there's things like that, a small forest opening edged with shrubs, natural shrubs, bushes I call them. Over on the right side, where we're looking right now, is about an 8 acre abandoned field that's been abandoned for, I'm sure more than 50 years. It's grown up into a thicket of alders, some pasture spruce, and some other woody plants. So I look at this and I say, this just doesn't fit what my understanding is of a deer wintering area that's of large size, very thick, deep, and protected. Give me your comments.
Well, I think it's way too small to support a large number of deer. I suspect last winter the snow depths were not great through the winter. So they had two things here that really attract the deer. The closed canopy, because the crowns intercept snow, so the snow in this plantation is probably half of whatever it is in the adjacent hardwoods. And the second thing is they got food very, very nearby. They don't have to go into town to get their groceries. They spend the night here in the shelter, and in the daytime they go out a few steps out. It's not a big expenditure of energy to make trails to where the food is. So they were able to spend the whole winter here, or a good portion of the winter here.
When these couple fir blew down a couple or 3 years ago, I deliberately left them here instead of salvaging them. Very little commercial value to them, and I was following the generalized advice that fallen trees, fallen dead trees, uprooted trees are good for wildlife to remain as they've fallen on the forest floor. So I followed that prescription, but didn't fully understand why. What do these provide for wildlife?
As they decompose, they provide habitats for a lot of the critters that are at the bottom of the food chain that feed the apex predators, the larger predators, and they also provide some structure, and they also form a natural gap in the forest and we can see this regeneration in the natural gap that provides food for the browsers, and a log like this that's elevated like that might become a grouse drumming log for the male grouse in the spring.
As we were walking along, I stepped right over this chunk of rotten fallen wood and just figured that what I was looking at was just another part of its rotten end. Joe said, "Hey, wait a minute," and I let him take it from here.
This is most likely a bear has pulled this apart, seeking probably ant larvae or other insect larvae in this rotten piece of fur. So it's fresh, probably from this season, and this is quite common.
And right here is another example where I was just walking by with Joe behind me, another one of many uprooted root balls from trees that had blown over, and Joe once again said, "Hey, stop," and I'll let him take it from here.
This is most likely a dusting area for rough grouse that to rid themselves of parasites. They quite commonly seek a dusting area. Also, upturned root wads also provide preferred nesting habitat for white-throated sparrows.
If you have viewed the Chapter 2 video in my Logging with a Farm Tractor series, you might recognize this tree. Regardless, let me take you to that video clip that I shot 9 years ago in February 2016. This big aspen is another tree that I am not going to cut down. I'm going to leave this one behind for this reason. You see that big hole in the side of it? That tree is hollow, and there are a lot of birds and various other animals that either nest or live in cavities of large old trees. So this one is going to be left behind for wildlife. Now this tree, this big aspen, has been leaning like this for years. The wind has been trying to blow it down, but it just keeps hanging on and holding on, and I'm sure the animals that use its hollow interior are very happy about that. A couple years after filming that video clip, the strain of years fighting gravity and wind finally caught up with it, and brought this grand old tree to the ground. However, it continues to benefit wildlife, as Joe will explain.
This tree was habitat when it was standing, habitat when it was leaning, and it's still habitat. This is a marvelous big tree cavity. It goes up to about here and would be suitable for porcupine, fisher, or pine marten to use as a denning site.
I want to take Joe and you to a very, very special little glade within Bombadil Tree Farm. When you look at it, I know you are going to believe that it is an untouched area of virgin primal forest. That was my intent when over 30 years ago I harvested within it trees that were impeding its development into such a beautiful old growth environment. The grassy depression between Joe and the camera is a vernal pool, dry now in September, that holds water from the spring snowmelt well into late June, providing a breeding environment for a plethora of amphibians. This fallen log, covered with moss, has been lying where you see it since long before I first met it, nearly 50 years ago. Joe is breaking off and smelling a few rotten pieces to confirm that it is, as I had believed, a hemlock. Fallen trees at various stages of decay are a fundamental component of old-growth ecosystems, as are tree species such as these red spruce that commonly live for 150 to 200 years, with known individuals exceeding 300 years.
The mythical Maine shagbark maple. It's really a red maple that has exfoliating bark, which means it's peeling off. Often forest-dwelling bats will roost under these exfoliating bark pieces.
But there are none there today. Here is another one of the many forest openings that we have created or maintained within the forests of Bombadil Tree Farm. They're very aesthetically pleasing. They're very useful in that they do double duty as landings during timber harvest. But from the standpoint of wildlife, Joe, do these have much value?
Yes, the main value that they have is variability. Here we have a hardwood clump that's been left. There's a nice apple tree over on the edge, and there's even a spruce tree that wasn't cut that's in the clearing. So those small elements of variability can mean the presence of some species or not.
This viewing tower overlooks an approximately 5-acre or 2-hectare area that over 40 years ago we decided to manage for wildlife. Kathy and I have come to call it the Moose Meadow for the moose that we commonly find grazing on the buds and twigs of its mat of red osier bushes. While I remained in the tower with the camera, I sent Joe down to see what he might find for signs of current use by wildlife. What, Joe, you say that the way things are mashed down, they are one-way trails?
You can go the opposite way the bear came through. You're walking into everything coming your way.
I see. And you do feel confident from what you see down in there that bears were what made these trails?
Yeah, the way it's crushed down, I don't think it's moose.
Okay. Yeah, well, I have seen bear out here very frequently.
Okay.
Over the last 42 years, as we have slowly converted abandoned agricultural fields back to forest, we have deliberately left openings, as you're looking at right here. Now, I don't mow them every year. What I do, however, is I encourage them to grow into bushes like we're looking at here, but never want those bushes to grow up so much that I can't easily mow them with my bush hog mower into field again. So I'm going to ask Joe if what I've been doing from the standpoint of wildlife has been beneficial.
What we have here is a nice interspersion of different types of habitat. We've got an open field, a forest, another open field, softwood forest, I should have said, scattered hardwood trees out in this field, and it looks to me like Vince is mowing it on some kind of a rotation, like a 3-year rotation. So you have habitats for the birds that like it clean, mowed this year, and they like it with some cover for the ground nesting birds, with some cover so it isn't mowed. So this is a really nice mixture: hardwood, softwood, forest, and field.
Over the years, as we have planted back into trees many acres, many hectares of abandoned agricultural fields, or have encouraged the natural conversion of former agricultural fields, we've encouraged along the edge red clover. Joe, does the red clover have more than just a minor value for wildlife?
Yes, it does, because it's very high in protein, so it's one of the better foods that are out there in terms of protein, and it's fixes nitrogen in the soil, so it improves the site, the fertility of the site, as well as high quality forage.
Not far behind the viewing tower, several wild apple trees enhance the edge of the moose meadow. Hey, and Joe, we have many, more than 50 wild apple trees on our property that were not here when we purchased it back in 1976. We have deliberately encouraged the development of wild apple trees on this property, and it's a no-brainer that a lot of different animals take advantage of them, because we see all kinds of animals out around the apple trees. So I take it you're going to agree that for the purpose of wildlife habitat, wild apple trees are a good thing to have. Am I right?
You sure are. And you know, this is a beautiful one. It's open grown, it's free to grow, and it's you've got branches to the ground, but they're really being heavily browsed by deer and or moose, and so you're providing that benefit, and they look very healthy as long as they can stay in the sun like this. So yeah, and so many different species of wildlife use these apple trees. I mean, the list is almost endless.
And I don't want to get into an argument with you. Maybe I do. Prior to European settlement in the U.S., well, prior to European settlement anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, there were no apple trees. Am I correct?
Yes. There were crab apples. There were native crab apples, the ones with all the thorns on them, but no what is it, Malus? I can't remember the scientific name of the apple tree, but yeah, these all came from Europe as cuttings.
Okay. I could wear out the soles on many pairs of boots, walking with Joe in the woods, and never stop learning something new about wildlife. I hope that you have not only enjoyed this video, but also learned a few things about the wildlife that share their forest home with us. And Joe not only welcomes, but requests your questions, comments, and criticism. On the wood lot that are now almost entirely old growth,